And I'll show you a live demo of the current version 3.2. So this is our demo environment. And it's as easy as this. Is no extra applications, no other servers to start up. It's just a menu item in your HxGN system. And if you click on that menu item, it will load up data. So your work orders, your activities, scheduling, your employees and their shifts, as I explained a little bit earlier, and puts this in this graphical user interface. I will go through all sections of this user interface and show you a little bit how it works. So here on the left, you have your work order and activity data in what you can call a grid, if you're familiar with HxGN, or a table or a list view. All work orders are one lines with their data, so like start, end date, status, work order type, maybe there's a priority. And if you unfold it, you get the activities below. So it can be one, can be multiple, can be none, of course. And you can see your work order code, on which equipment it has been created, department, start date, duration, etc. And the same goes for your activities of all the columns which are applicable, of course. So this is, of course, you can define which work orders you want to see here. I will get to that at a later stage in this demo. On the right, you can see the timeline. And this is the strength of the Gantt chart. Here you can see your work plotted in the timeline. For example, this is a little bit August, so last month I can see there's some work here, there's some work here. If I hover over it, I get a little bit more details, so I can quickly see where work has been planned. And planned, as I say, maybe it's a PM schedule work order, maybe it's a breakdown, someone has put in a start and end date, and now your planner has to look at those work orders and see where they can be scheduled. Well, that can easily be done, as I said, by drag and drop. Let me zoom in a little bit. Here's a work order, and I can easily drag and drop it somewhere else on the timeline, and it will get rescheduled. I can, of course, do that for each activity as well. And you will notice that the work order will join. If there are multiple activities, let me see if I can find a work order with multiple activities, like this one or this one. Drag and drop system, of course, still applies. If I take the work order, then all activities will join. If I take just one activity and put it somewhere else, you will see that the work order will get stretched automatically because it spans first activity until end of the last activity. So that way I can easily, if I drag and drop, change start and dates according to your needs. From this grid, you have also some ability to change data because it's an editable grid on some of the columns, like the start date. If I double click, I can change the start date here for this work order. I can open a calendar and put it somewhere else, like on September 25th, next Monday. And it will get rescheduled. Now it will skip the Sunday, so it will jump to the Monday. If I made a mistake, there's an undo button, and there's also a redo button, which you saw me use earlier. There are some other ways to edit your data as well. If you right-click on your work order, or you can also right-click on activity, there is an edit option, and that gives you a pop-up from which you can edit some of the data. Like on the work order start date, you can edit. The end date is calculated by all underlying activities, but you can assign a priority. Maybe you want to change the status after you have scheduled it. Maybe you want to assign it to someone. You can all do that from this pop-up. Same goes for the activity. You can also right click on the activity. You can click the edit. From here you can edit some activity specific fields as well, like how many people are required. Maybe it's a hired labor, maybe you want some external partner to do this labor for you. You can click on hired labor and you can select your external supplier. Some other data is just for visibility, like estimated hours and the total of scheduled hours. So you can see this activity has not been scheduled yet. No resource has been assigned yet. So there are some editing capabilities from this user interface. If we look at the bottom half, you can see the resource panel. And on the left, you see your employees. Of course, I have removed any names to comply with GDPR, privacy rules, etc. So they are called employee 1 to 10 in my demo environment. But you can see which trade they have, from which department they are. Maybe they are in some team. And the strengths of this version, of this planning suite version, is the use of shifts. So if you have created a shift and you have assigned your employee to this shift, you will see this here. So for example, employee 1 works only half days. Employee 2 has the default shift. Employee 6 has a Monday to Wednesday, and that is shown by the red line on this part of the resource panel. The default shift shows you 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and you can see half days, so probably 4 hours a day. That red line is not that high, so it limits his availability. The Monday to Wednesday shift, you can see that only on Monday to Wednesdays there's availability, and on Thursday and Friday the red line drops to 0. Which other shifts do we have? A weekend shift, so no availability during weekdays and 8 hours a day during Saturday and Sunday. So this will show you right away your employees' standard availability. And of course, you want to schedule your resources on your work. If I take this work order and we have not been able to perform this a couple of days ago, so what I'll do, I will drag it to 16th. Let me just put it on Friday. And then I can say, edit the activity. There is a resources tab here. And this gives you an overview of resources, maybe already scheduled, maybe you're still using InfoEM to do these kind of things. Maybe you do it some other ways, but of course you can do it via the planning suite as well. So if there are records already in your EAM system, they will be shown here. If they're not, you can use planning suite to create these records. So for example, if I want to schedule employee, let me make this a little bit bigger. Employee 10, I can choose employee 10. It's grouped by trade, so that makes it a little bit more easy to choose the right employee. And default, it will assign 100% capacity. So in this case, employee 10 has 8 hours availability that day, so it will assign 8 hours. And you can already, so it's dynamic, you can right away see it here on this grid. And then I can click Save. Now I can see here that this employee 10 has been scheduled on this work order activity on this date for 8 hours, and it's fully booked. As you can see on the pop-up, 8 hours of 8 hours has been allocated. Of course, if you can work faster than that, you can change the hours to maybe 6 hours. Or maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, and it will show you right away here on this grid. And if you made a mistake, you can of course change it. So if an employee has already been scheduled somewhere, then of course you can see this as well. Let me find some examples in time where someone has already been scheduled. So as you can see here, for example, employee 1 has been scheduled here on work order 10001, activity 20 for 2 hours. So you already know, okay, his capacity is 4 hours, so I can schedule an extra 2 hours. So all this information is very useful for your planning process to see, okay, where can I schedule people still, where people been over allocated maybe, because that will show in a red color, in a red bar. Then maybe you should change something around, maybe put some other employee on it. All this information is depicted here in this graphical interface, which allows you to make good decisions and improve your scheduling efficiency. Some other features from the planning suite. We'll go through them right here. This is the data spice selector. So as I already mentioned, you can define which work orders and activities will be shown here, and you can personalize them, and those will be shown here, and you can use them like the normal data spice you're familiar with if you're using HxGN. There are some export options. If you prefer to make a hard copy, perhaps you can print it to export to PDF and print it out. You can export to Excel if you like. There are some settings you can play around with as your personal settings. So for visualization, maybe you want to don't show the task labels. Maybe you want to show deadlines or not. Maybe you want to use automatical filtering on resources, and the layout, which you can change here. So width of columns, the width of the grid versus the timeline, that can all be stored to your personal settings. The next are the undo and the redo buttons. As I said, there is no database behind the planning suite. Data is stored and kept in memory. So all changes can be undone and maybe redone if you like. And if you're happy with the changes you've made, you hit the save button, and then it will be saved to the EAM system directly. These others are just, the other buttons are just for convenience. So expand all, collapse all. You saw me expand and collapse those work orders. And you can use these buttons to quickly expand or collapse everything you see here in the grid. The next buttons are for manipulating the timeline. You already saw me using them. You can zoom in on the timeline. And you can also zoom out, of course, to go to a monthly timeline. Maybe you want to see quarters, etc. You can jump through the timeline. It's dynamically calculated. So for example, it now has recognized that there are no work orders behind this date, but still, if you want to move over a little bit, you can use this button and you can see those on the timeline as well. And if you're lost, there's a button which brings you back to today. So my local time is 4:32 in the afternoon. Some other features is a group by. We now have a feature to group by equipment. Of course, you can see all your work orders as individual work orders. The group by equipment will, as the feature says, group them by equipment. It will create a parent level and sums up all the work orders and activities with the same equipment. So this can be very convenient if you are looking at, I don't know, a production line and see where it has availability or when it has it have scheduled work, and when it has availability again. For those things, you can use the grouping function. So in conjunction to the rollup functions, you can quickly see on a group, equipment group, where all the work has been scheduled at this moment. So for example, here I have some work orders, and here at the end I also have some work orders. And you can play around a little bit with the user interface. If you have a larger screen or a smaller screen, you can play around with the look and feel, and you can save that to your personal settings. And if you just want to see the grid, then you can hide the schedule and hide the timeline as well. For that, you can also use those buttons here, as if you are familiar with the EAM system. It's called the split view. It's similar to that. So here we have the grid. From here, of course, you can sort. Sort on equipment, ascending, descending. If you right click, you can show a filter bar, and you can filter as well on a certain work order or on a certain equipment. And of course, you can have multiple filters as well, and some are multiple drop-down filters. So if you only want to see released work orders or in preparation, then you can select those. Well, I don't have any of those. And if you want to clear all filters, there's a button here which removes all the filters for you. So at the default, we are showing some columns, others we hide by default, like a trade or shift, or maybe a used location on a work order, maybe use cost code on a work order, you want to see that. And you can activate that and it will be shown here, and you can save this layout to your personal settings. And last but not least, this blue button over here is just an info button, which shows you which version you are running, which core version, which language, which work order screen name function is used for gathering and saving data, and which license you have. We have 2 licenses, just a viewer, read-only license, or a full editor. This, of course, is convenient information that if there's something with your installation and you need our help, then you can provide us this information and we can help you in a better way.